Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Welcome back, viewers, to another episode of the Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. We're here today viewing podcasters in their natural habitat. I'm Jonathan Ian David Attenberg Manzur, and we see here Christopher Morgan,
Star,
Scott Thurlow,
Don't look at me.
and mating in the corner is a Stephen Ramosi. And today we are, it's a start, I guess, a new season of foreign films.
The next,
The next year. A good
The next
way
phase,
to
we'll call
categorize these things. The Greek Attenberg, which came out 2010.
10.
And Scott, would you like to start us off with the funny log bar?
Yeah, so I've come up with my so-called Greek life, and I guess I'm about to tell you pretty much about that with plot. Yeah, so it centers on a 23-year-old Greek woman named Marina, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like a lot of mundane stuff. She's caring for her dying, ailing father, and she's very aloof, sort of removed from humanity itself, and it focuses on like her struggles with trying to come to terms with her sexuality, if she even has any. And it's just like she has a best friend who is very sexual, so she sort of like tries to teach her and like bring her into the fold, if you will. She works like a sort of dead end job, driving a taxi, and one of her new fares, like she starts up a very awkward relationship with him, and sort of somewhat comfortably comes into herself. And then has to deal with her father dies at the end and deal with the bureaucracies of having him cremated as per his wishes. And yeah, it's a lot of mundane, like minutia stuff, like over the course of, a couple months in her life, more or less. The film isn't quite clear about it, but the timeline, I would say, is roughly that. And that's pretty much it. Not a lot happens. It's more of a character study. You're following her very few limited relationships, and her sort of like somewhat changing as a person, somewhat growing. But it's also set, I believe, in like sort of the austerity period of Greece.
Mm.
So like that's happening in the background. I'll speak more about that in style when we get to it. But plot-wise, I guess I'm looking at like an alright 2. It was a little slow going. I don't even want to say slow burn, because it wasn't that long, but it did feel like you felt the minutia of these characters' lives, and especially hers. And sometimes that wasn't all that engaging because not much is happening. Maybe that's life, but plot-wise, like, run out to you on a screen, it was okay.
They were trying to capture the mundanity of her life, and they did.
Perhaps too well, we'll say.
It is a very dour movie. It's a very slow movie because not much is happening in her life. So we're just kind of watching her have fun with her friend, doing weird dances.
But do they have fun?
I don't know.
There's not a single smile in this movie, which is something I was looking for.
I feel like there's just the shit they do, like no matter what. Yeah, go on.
So one thing that's interesting is there is a tie-in with David Attenborough, and in a sense it's kind of hinted that she kind of grew up with David Attenborough and kind of views the world through kind of a detached, clinical look at things.
Yes, I think that's pretty apparent, yeah.
And I think they either should have leaned more into that, or
gotten rid of it entirely.
It didn't work, I think, as they intended it to. I think they should have gotten David Attenborough to monologue the entire... just him describing scenes as they're happening. And we see here the young girl is hanging up her clothes on the laundry, and she's mourning her father's recent death. So in this ritual, like that kind of but that's what the film is without
that layer to it.
Yeah. So I'm giving it a 2 as well, because it's certainly a plot.
It is a plot. I think it's interesting to watch. I guess I'll go a little bit more into what I just said about there's literally no joy at all in this movie. It's like just this complete
There's like
joyless,
maybe brief bubbling moments of it, but not much.
But honestly, like no character smiles at all, which was something like from the beginning I was like, all right, is there any like happiness? Is there any break to this?
I definitely noticed that, but
at all. And from what I saw, and maybe I missed something, but I don't think so, because I think it's a very specific aesthetic choice, that it's, like you said, it's very dour, it's very gray. If you notice at the end of the
I was going to mention that in style as well, yeah.
When she goes to, scatter her father's ashes, it's a very gray day. It looks like it's about to rain. It just seems like nobody is enjoying anything. And like, I feel like that kind of hurts a little bit the relationships that she has, where it's like, all right, I have nothing to compare this like just ultimate it's not even like sad. Her relationship with like her friend is very they're at odds a lot of times. They talk shit about each other like openly, but they don't have any moments of like
outright
happiness together. And like the biggest moments of joy that happen in this film are when they're pretending to be animals or like something like that, which happens quite a bit.
Like the Attenberg thing.
Moment with her father on the bed, and the moment with her friend, like right in the beginning when they try to kiss. Her friend Bella tries to teach Marina how to kiss, and then it just degenerates into them like acting like cats and like chasing each other off. So there's this really like animalistic feel to a lot of the movie, which I think is part of what they were going for. But overall, the plot was fine. Again, like you guys said, I'll probably agree with the soft too. Yeah. I don't think it was bad by any means, so I'm not going to give it a 1. But I don't think it was great by any means either, so I'm definitely not going to give it a 3.
This movie like really kind of fucked me up. Started watching it last night. I was getting a little sleepy, so I finished watching it this morning.
I don't blame you.
No. But don't get me wrong, because a lot of what I'm going to say is going to go into themes and style. But overall, how can I say I loved this movie but didn't enjoy it? But because I did just say it, but because I found myself rewinding it and getting fascinated with certain aspects of it, I followed the narrative. The movie simultaneously went really quick for me and very slow at the same time. I didn't know how to process this movie, really. So in a weird way, I have to give it a 3.
Wow,
that's fair.
Because it kept me.
If it was personally impactful,
yeah. But the thing was, I kept feeling like I missed something. But like, so I'd rewind it, and it didn't turn out that I missed. It didn't turn out that I missed anything. But I felt it was important that I didn't miss anything, even though nothing happened. So I've got to give it a 3.
So waiting for Godot of films for you.
Thank you. Yes, basically.
All right, Chris. We'll continue talking about the themes.
The themes for this, I'm going to say overall, the theme for this is change. This is about one person who's lived a relatively sheltered life. I mean, basically, her 2 friends are her father and her friend, who is a friend.
I feel they're friends of convenience.
Yeah,
there are.
That's
like,
what it seems
by situation and not
but
by
like
choice.
they both know when in doubt that she communicates and to communicate to her through the animal documentaries, which she watches. But watching her, it's basically having her deal with her life, that things have to change in context. Like at one point, like her friend is very, promiscuous in a way. But while she is not very socially or sexually adept, Marina does understand that she does this, that Bella does sleep around for a validation. And at one point,
well, at least that's her perception.
And I'm gonna kind of cross over to style. But I found it really interesting is that she and Bella, the movie gets this in style, but the movie shot a lot in profiles. So her and Bella are, when they shoot them, generally speaking, they're always facing each other or they're side by side. And then at one point, she asks Bella to sleep with her father, and Bella basically walks off camera, and she basically calls her out that she needs validation, and basically, I need you to do this for my father. And, and they always have that thing where they cut back to where they're doing that little dance up and down the sidewalk. And, my favorite scene in the film is when they were walking together at night while the music's playing. But at the end, after they throw their father's ashes in there, Bella gets on the scooter and takes off. And then a few seconds, a minute or two later, Marina in the Volvo, because she's a driver for this company, follows her. So I found it really interesting that it was the only time in the film they weren't in unison. And I feel like it's a matter, the theme is changing and adapting. And I have to be honest with you when I said, because when she goes coffin shopping, urn shopping, I kept thinking, I thought about, well, when Beth and I go, we want our ashes mixed with the dogs and buried under one of those trees. It was like funny because we reviewed a few last month at my behest. We reviewed Seventh Seal, which is a guy playing chess with death. And I always figured that movie about life. But to me, at 50 years old, watching this movie, watching this person change, Marina change and have to adapt, made me think about, like, it's stupid. It's not stupid. And I'm getting maudlin here, and, just deal with me for 1 second. But my wife and I got matching tattoos. It says sine qua non, without which not. There's things that are essential. And, that to me, when she was buying stuff for her dad's funeral and trying to figure everything out, her dad was they even said it like, they're each other's buddy, that her dad was the most essential thing in her life. Mm-hmm. And her friend was kind of, in a weird way, ornamentation. She was like the surrogate for her social life.
I mean, it was a friendship of convenience, as one of you.
Yeah. True. And I just feel like we just watched this person change. I mean, the interaction between her and the engineer, played by, I'm not going to pretend to...
Yorgos Lanthimos. Yes,
he directed The Favorite and Lobster. And what I'm saying is, it was just, I found it a very fascinating movie. I really thought more, ironically enough, in a movie about mortality, I thought about life. In a movie about changes in life, I thought about mortality. But I found the film really affecting. In the first half that I watched last night, gave me some really dreams that I'm still trying to unravel today. And then afterwards, I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, Rich woke up, a friend of ours is staying with us, and Rich came out, he's just like, hey, and I'm like, I just watched the cinematic equivalent of First Time I Ever Saw Your Face, as sung by Roberta Flack, which is a beautiful song, but always has an underlying melancholy that really gets into my bones. And this movie had the same feeling for me. I'm giving this a really strong one because this movie affected me in ways that I'm still trying to figure out.
So what you're saying is you're a 23-year-old Greek woman.
Yes, I got you. I'm a 23-year-old.
No, I mean, I'm gonna like, that's my only joke. Is that, like, I had a struggle with self-actualization, which is what sort of you mentioned, growing and changing, right? Sort of kind of realizing who you are, like what you might like, or who you are versus other people. And clearly I found Marlena's struggle with that was, you get the angle from her with her father and her with her friend Bella. And again, they're like sort of influence, their push and pull, like their tug upon her, like her own sensibilities. So yeah, like I thought it was fine. Again, maybe it obviously didn't affect me as much as it clearly has you, Chris, and that's fine. Like, I get it if it had. But I think it was still clearly there, and it was sort of the whole point. And maybe this flows into protagonist, but to me, it was basically more or less a character study, rather than like a plot unto itself, as we just discussed. So given that, I think it was handled well. I think the portrayal was quite excellent. So I'm leaning towards a pretty solid one on theme, so Eddie.
But did she change?
I think she did. I can make an argument that I would. Go ahead.
So I feel that this, in a way, is... I mentioned before, it feels like a documentary in a lot of sense. Except we're following the documentarian kind of... It's almost like they have the David Attenborough amongst the gorillas. It's almost as if we're solely focused on David Attenborough and just having the girls he's studying in the background. I feel like Marina is an interesting character because how divorced she is from reality and how she's mimicking what other people around her do. But it's it doesn't feel like any of those choices were her desires, more so of her attempting to fit in with what she's told is how she should act. And it's, I don't know, you said I want to jump in.
I think that's kind of an interesting thing where she has this very obvious like self-identity struggle. She certainly thinks that she is asexual in the beginning of the movie. She says that the sex basically turns her, like, you know, she's not interested. It makes her want to puke. And then she meets the engineer, played by Yorgos Lanthimos, and she decides that, at least with him, it's not that gross. So, like, there's this kind of offshoot of her own asexuality that where she kind of discovers by being clinically interested in like what sex is all about, that she kind of goes into this like very obviously trying to be like, I just want to do it because it's something that people do and I want to see what it's like. And then you get to the point where, despite her own proclivity towards like being the documentarian, right? Like there's a sex scene where she just keeps talking.
I was gonna say she narrates her sex scenes.
Can you please shut up? Like, I'm trying to have sex. But like, you know, even before that happens, the first time that she is in a room with him, she just takes off all her clothes and he's like, no, that's not how this works. And he kind of like brings her into the sexual society, I guess, if you will. But there is a point where she starts to kind of acclimate to it, for lack of a better term, where she says like, I thought I was going to hate this, but I don't really, like, you smell nice or whatever, or like your fucking balls are weird or whatever, whatever she's talking about in that scene. And I think that it's kind of, for lack of a better term, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, where you're right, Ian, she does maintain that kind of like aloofness, and I think that she does fall certainly somewhere on like an asexual spectrum in terms of this, but she also does find that she can get some enjoyment from that, and that's kind of where the change is. Not even a change, but like a discovery of herself, of at least that part of herself, you know, without getting too far into it. There's a whole fucking spectrum of like asexuality that you can go into, and like I thought, like when I first saw this, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This is a movie from 2010 about an asexual woman, and you didn't see that like in 2010, and you don't see that now. But I think it's even more interesting that they got even deeper into the weeds with it, and like discussing how much her personality is shaped by that, and how much very specific branch of asexuality that she kind of went down, and or discovered about herself. So I think that that's really a lot of what, like, that self-discovery is really a lot of what this is about, this movie's about, and I think that it's a pretty good theme in terms of this film.
But I think what's interesting is with the scene where she asks Bella to sleep with her father, it kind of suggests that she doesn't understand why people have sex.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. She only understands it in an abstract way. You're right, though. It's I think I have to give it a 1 simply from it tackling a subject matter that you don't see very often.
No, and to build on Steve-O's point, what Steve was saying was, I don't think it matters if we actually saw her change. It's the fact that she has to realize that she's got to change, she's got to adapt to this, because she had lived in a state of arrested development, right?
A little bit, but like, you know, of her own making, and I think that she still is enshrouded by that by the end of the movie. But she does make important discoveries about herself throughout the course of exploring, like, her grief about her father and her friendship with Bella. And I think that is really what the theme and like what this movie wants you to take away from it.
That's basically what I was going to sort of rebut you with, is that, like, it may not be much, but she does grow into her sensibilities to a degree, at least, versus where she started out with. So, like, yeah, it was like a very small baby step, but it was some kind of step there.
Well, that's true.
So, like I said, she was struggling with it, but she did make a small stride, I guess. But I still think it does make for a pretty solid, effective theme.
All right, I'm going to talk about the antagonist here. Well, death is obviously...
I was going to say life.
And life.
Of course, in general. I know I fall back in that.
That's exactly my train of thought watching this.
Good.
See, the thing is, it's such a strange thing to discuss because of who this character is. She's so, in a sense, clinically detached that she's fighting the norms of society, and also the fact that she's in an industrial town without much going on, and the death of her father and the change in the house. She's going to be basically alone after this film. I don't know if I can give it a 1, though. And that's just my kind of instinctual feeling. I'm willing to hear arguments otherwise.
It's tough because, I guess, I'll follow you up, because I'm somewhat wavering myself, even though I said what I just said. Like, of course, that's defaultly true always in almost anything. So, like, it feels like more of a cop-out to say it here to this specific film. I don't, like, she was certainly, I don't know, like, I know we label this one antagonist, but I don't think she was antagonizing quotes by anything specifically. She felt the social pressures, as you mentioned, or at least pressures in her life, some social, some personal, sure. But I don't know if it was enough to, like, that her character at least felt that she had to break against it, because that's what I just said in themes, or she made a small stride, but not a huge one.
So my argument, I was thinking while you were talking about this, is that a lot of her antagonism is her own doing or her own personality, but it's not enough to be self-destructive. It's somewhere in this gray area in between that doesn't necessarily work for me.
That's why I'm wavering. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not sure there's a super strong antagonist here. Like, it is like the specter of her father's death, I guess, is the really thing that is bothering her.
The most impactful
throughout
thing.
The film.
Sure.
We don't know what she is without that, though. So it's tough to say how impactful it is on her actual personality, or like the way that it affects the way that she acts, things like that. Because this entire film she has that, right? So it's obviously it's affecting her. But she doesn't seem
like low grade,
super affected by it for most of the movie. I'm probably going to give antagonist a 0, not to say that it's, I just don't think it's a very important part of this film as far as like the way that the story is told.
I absolutely agree. I piled basically any bit of antagonism because I thought death, and then I thought what Scott said, no, it's about life, and then I realized those are themes, and it's not a fault of the film, but by design.
I knew you were going to say that. I was going to say it for you, but I figured, like, I'll let you say it, because that's what and I think it's more pertinent here than most.
Actually, I do have one last comment to make about this, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with the lack of joy in this film, in that I don't have any comparison, as you're making, to say how much more antagonist throughout this movie is she than her baseline?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You just pointed out.
Yeah.
And I think it deals with the lack of joy and the lack of comparison in this. All right, so Steve-O, on to you with the protagonist.
All right, so I think it's pretty clearly Marina. I don't know what Chris thinks is hilarious right now.
I just never mind.
But yeah, she is a fascinating character study, I think, of this, young woman who is dealing with some shit and doesn't really feel a connection to humanity at large, right? She has her connection to her father who's dying, like she's losing half of the people that she cares about. Her mother died years before, and her friend Bella, who at best they have an antagonistic relationship, right? Like
I think there's glimpses of them being genuine friends, but it's strained more than not. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I think that the way that they interact is they are antagonistic towards each other, though. You know, like they both kind of try to push each other's buttons almost every scene they're in together.
Except when they have choreographed dancing, which brings everyone together.
Other than those scenes where there's no dialogue and they just walk down a street strangely together in a almost a funny walk this way manner bit, you know. But you know, I those scenes are important to show the closeness of them. I think I was wondering why those scenes were included at all, other than just for like weirdness sake. But it is like, if those didn't exist, I would be very skeptical of these two.
It does ground their relationship, their friendship a bit.
The fact that they, you know, do that type of stuff together, like they just have these choreographed like walks and things, seems like the most fun that anybody has in this movie, I guess. And you know, they are visually interesting. But anyway, I think that she is a fascinating character to try and pick apart, as we've been doing this entire episode. And I think I'm going to give her a 1 for that. I think that she's pretty good.
I mean, she's the heart and soul of the story. Obviously, it centers around her. And yeah, she's a non-traditional character, as you mentioned earlier. And that makes for a very fascinating, interesting look at this person and what she's like. And I think the portrayal, I'm sorry, I don't have the actress name in front of me, but
it's Ariane Labed, I believe.
Yep. She did a great job, I think, like with the script and with what was there to work with. And I did like, I think she was the most interesting part of it. Granted, like, maybe that's saying all that much given what surrounds it, but I do think she deserves a 1. So that's all I'm saying.
I have nothing to add. 1.
Yes.
All right.
Nice. Scott, supporting.
So that leaves. So this one, I'm going to give a 1, but only for her father, and probably only not only, but largely because it relates to a question coming up with dialogue. So, but I do think, like as you mentioned, their relationship I thought was believable. Right? She at least cares for her father, and they even have like not a strange relationship, but a very unique one, I guess I'll say. And yeah, and then you get the other side of her and her and Bella, like what they're like, you know, what their activities and behaviors are when they're hanging out together and what they get up to. So while there's probably those like the only 3 really like actual characters that matter in this film at all.
Oh, and the engineer.
Sure, like I don't know, like because yeah, you're right. I don't want to discount. I don't want to discount it altogether, but he hardly says much, or is there. He's there for like more like to advance her personal sensibilities, as I was saying.
He's basically her vibrator.
Yeah, kind of like he's more of a catalyst, and other like versus a character, I guess, unto himself is the best thing I can say there. But I do think her father and Bella like form like a triangle, like the other pillars of a triangle with her. And yeah, I thought they were pretty well done, pretty well fleshed out, and well portrayed as well. I think I'm leaning more towards a solid enough 1 for secondary.
I'm going to give a secondary 1. And it was weird because she asked her dad early in the beginning, you know, do you imagine me naked? And he's like, no. And she goes, I imagine you naked without a penis, basically. But the thing is, Bella's her sexuality, her father's her comfort. And in the engineer, she found an older guy, but she kind of like tried to discover her sexuality. And it wasn't like any kind of bizarre, I guess Oedipal is the closest thing I can say to it. But
it was definitely bizarre.
No, but the thing is, there's a source of comfort.
There was no creepy vibe to it.
No, there isn't. Yeah, it's just a matter of comfort and this new sexuality, to which then led to her saying to Bella, you know, sleep with my dad, which basically was saying, look, I need you to validate him. And like there's an understanding that she had. I cannot put my finger on it, but in a weird way, what I'm saying sounds really creepy, but it really wasn't in execution.
The opposite of how Chris
when you say that, it sounds creepier. Anyway,
God.
It's a really fascinating thing you just kind of touched on. I don't even know if you meant it this way, but like in a way, the engineer is almost a combination between her father and Bella, right? Like it's like he is that like comfort to her, but he's also the sexual part, like that she refuses to imagine about her father, that he's not like a sexual being or whatever. Sure.
That's a good point.
And so he's kind of like the middle ground that she can bang. And
it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
And she narrates it like David Attenberg.
Yeah, for sure. But like that is kind of fascinating.
She just wants to bang David Attenborough.
I mean, 100%. 100%. I would take that shot.
It's understandable.
You got to shoot your shot, man. Yeah. Anyway, that is really interesting, and that to me, that realization kind of makes him a more fascinating character to me. I guess
it does elevate him. That's a fair point.
I think that supporting character is fairly strong for me in this one. I like her father, her friend Wall. I don't know, like off-putting at points, is a really important foil to her as far as her sexuality, and then the engineer kind of pulls in all parts of her world into one and gives her a sense of comfort while also letting her explore new parts of her, personality and sexuality.
We should have put up Freud.
We should have. Damn it.
I think we were debating it over that.
He's right there. He's staring at me.
Oh my God. How did you not? Yeah.
So that's a 1 for Freud.
1 for Freud.
1 for 14 secondary characters.
Okay, Chris, on to you with dialogue.
With dialogue is really fascinating because, again, a slice of life film comes down to dialogue being a matter of realism with regard to how the characters are. And I am going to say that I'm going to give this 1 because I think what was said is just as important as to what wasn't said. I mean, if you notice their little dancing scenes up and down the thing, they'd always dress up for it. They'd always dress up for it, but one was in black and one was blue. So like black and blue, like, like when they're saying when you're fat, doing battle of some sort, whatever it is, it's like, it's like a black and blue kind of thing. Like you've gotten
when you get punched in the face.
When you get punched in the face. But at the same time, I thought
cruising.
Yeah.
It's really funny because themes, dialogue, and style to me are very much intermesh and they really inform one another. But I think I love the interaction with her and her dad. I love the things they said. And I thought it was really interesting, her interactions with Bella. And at the same time, like I said, most of the time, a lot of the time, the conversations would devolve into them mimicking animals that they saw on the screen, which meant that in a weird way, like she was communicating to them in a way that was comfortable for them, and they were communicating to her in a way that was comfortable to her. So this is exactly why I kept rewinding this movie, because I loved, like, I'd always rewind to make sure I caught the dialogue, because what wasn't said or what followed seemed to somehow in a weird way reflect that.
I get you.
So in terms of a whole package, I am going to give this a 1.
I actually think that the dialogue was one of the stronger parts of this film.
I'll back that up.
Whether it's the incredibly, at least in my experience, incredibly realistic portrayal of conversation, or at least conversation when you're first exploring
first time,
your sexuality. I was having flashbacks.
You got PTSD.
But overall, I think that the father had a lot of good philosophical quotes about what it means to die.
Number 1.
And it's not out of character because he's an educated man.
I believe he's an architect.
He's an architect, yes.
Yeah. Or engineer.
He's an architect.
He's like a famous architect.
So it worked quite well for me. And it's a very small cast, and it seems like Bella and Marina work really well, because it seems like people who wouldn't be friends in a larger town, but because they're the only ones their age in this town together, they're friends. It all worked really well for sort of small picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't have much more to add, but I certainly think her father had the best dialogue. Like, some of, like, if not the funniest, but, like, at least more light-ish leaning. And, like, I believed all their relationships, interactions, as you said, Chris, organic, like, yes. And, yeah, the situation implied, like, that's probably any other, outside of this, they wouldn't have been, people who would hang out with each other or talk to each other, but because of this, they are. And I believe that aspect of it, too. So, yeah, it was all solid, sustained itself. And I think it went a long way to selling the characters.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you guys said pretty much everything I was going to say, but the really fascinating, like, philosophical discussions that she has with her father are good, and the conversation, like as you mentioned, Ian, the conversation like instead of sex, I guess that was happening the first time they tried to have sex. The first time she had to try to have sex with the engineer.
Pre-coital discourse.
Just hilarious. Like, the funniest part of the movie, for sure, I thought. And yeah, so I'm going to give it a 1.
Stop saying you're sorry. Sorry.
Sorry for being sorry.
All right, I'm on to style. Now, I'm very torn about this because there are moments I like. There are things I can see them attempting to do. I don't know if they pulled it off. I don't know if you said it on cast or prior to it, but you mentioned that some of it is like a bit of absurdity for absurdity's sake. Although I don't know, I don't know what to make on it. I like the shots of the industrial. They do a good job of giving life, but that's the wrong word because it's not life. The dying carcass of this industrial town as it falls apart. But sometimes it lingers too long, like the final scene. I don't know. I'm really torn about this. I'm going to pass it along.
So let me jump in. So you mentioned it, and I was waiting to say it here, is that, like, if you noticed, there was never, a la how nobody fucking smiles in this film, there is zero sunlight. It has this, like, washed out filter to it, and, like, it's always rainy or just a gray, overcast day the entire time. But I think that, like, that matched the mood and the tone of the film in general, like the story and the characters. So I think I appreciated that, even if it wasn't, like, the most uplifting, like, you know, like, positive thing in the world in terms of, like, emotionally. I think it cinematically matched and was well done. Now, granted, yes, there were a couple of slow points where, like, they didn't really need to have a shot of this for, like, 2 seconds. They could have just cut that out and gone to the next scene. But I felt like that was more few and far between for me. I think overall, I got what they were going for. I got that it was supposed to, again, reflect sort of interplay between what the characters are doing and saying and feeling and the actual, like, again, the cinematography of the story itself. So I'm leaning towards a pretty decent, solid 1, and that's my stance.
Okay. I think I'm similar to Ian. There are shots in this movie that I thought were brilliant. Like, really, really good. And there were choices that were made that I was confused about. And even though I said, earlier that the scenes where they're walking up and down, like, were important to establish their friendship, I was confused as to why they didn't establish a friendship in another way that involves them actually talking to each other and having a real connection.
But maybe that's the only connection they do have.
I was going to say that probably
but I mean,
your own question.
Certainly there were times where they had to talk about, like, choreographing these things, and, like, there was just, like, more. Maybe the idea of it was we want to make this like an Attenberg documentary where we just catch them in their natural environment, just doing the things that they have been.
But it feels so unnatural,
right? Well, that's kind of the thing. Like, I'm not sure what to think about it. I thought that the music was pretty good most of the time.
It was fine,
but also I found, like, some choices a little bit strange, and, like, I don't know. There were parts of this. I feel like this is a movie that's meant to make you feel kind of this way, and, like, certainly
that's
it's
kind
like,
of my point. Yeah.
It's meant to make you feel, like, on edge or, like, not sure how to feel about the characters and the setting and, like, all that stuff. Like, it's all designed that way. But does that make it good? I don't know. I mean, to me, certainly it makes it good to some people and bad to others. I'm not sure where I land on that.
It's they're trying to capture a feeling of dying people in a dying town and the oppression involved with that.
I think for me they do.
I just when you guys were talking, I kept having thoughts back to A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and how that was trying to capture a similar feel to it of despair and being trapped and all that. Except they pulled that off very well.
That was obviously much,
I agree, was better done
stylistically.
Sure.
Yeah. It's really funny because I thought a lot about that movie when watching this movie.
But that's it. Is that this is attempting to be artistic too, and I can make a comparison to a better artistic film when the goal is to present this in an artistic way.
But I would say, I mean, if we're going to compare them, I would say that A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is meant to be like stylistically cool, right?
Yes.
This is meant to not make you feel like it's cool at all. Like this is the opposite. Like it's meant to make you feel.
Their intent was there.
Like, but I'm just it didn't work for me.
Okay,
so that's where I'm wrong. Like I'm not. I don't. It worked for you, great. It just didn't.
I'm very, very on the fence about it. Chris, what do you want to say?
I loved the style of this movie. I loved, like, with the beginning where they're trying to kiss, which was the most ridiculous thing, which is awesome. And then she's talking about, like, you know, think of it as worms. And you see them, like, sticking their tongues at each other, trying to touch each other's tongues. And it just, against the white, just was a fascinating image. And then, again, they devolved into the whole animal thing. And then they immediately went to a sprinkler. And I was fascinated by that. And it was really interesting listening to you guys talk, was that they always walked up and down, or they did these little choreographed dances back and forth. And when they actually went together at night, they weren't doing any kind of choreography. They were arm in arm, and they were singing, and they were kind of
singing the song that they were learning together in the previous
and they were learning
scene.
together. Yeah, and I like the fact that she played bass too, Marina. But they were kind of comforting each other, like they were out in the real world now, and all of a sudden, so there's this whole reality versus fantasy thing that was playing. And as I said, before they would get to an image, the director stayed on an image for about a minute or two, but I always rewind it to see what the dialogue or the actions were prior to that. And I have to admit, anything that's shot in Greece, I'm going to be biased towards. I mean, went on our honeymoon in Greece, and I love.
Was it raining injury in a dying mining town?
No, there was not a drop of rain the whole time.
Okay.
But we were there before their economy had collapsed. But my whole point is,
it started raining a lot more after that.
Yeah. No, but to me, it's when I was there was a big push towards Greek cinema, a lot of Iranian cinema, Persian. We were getting a lot of the things we were watching, and that's why I said Star was the name of the channel we'd always watch, and there was a lot of talk about cinema, from the area. And it was interesting when she was talking about we're one of the Balkans, but I love the style of this film. I feel like if I were going to, and I will go back and check out certain scenes of this film, like them walking and I always loved as a kid the sound of like hard-soled shoes hitting like the concrete, which there was a lot of, because you have that clapping versus the grinding of whatever pebbles are underneath there. I just loved the style of this film so much. It was just, I just loved it.
Oh, by the way, there must have been misery in that town because their beach was awful.
Yeah.
The beaches in Greece are very rocky, and the Adriatic Sea is fucking freezing. It's not the Mediterranean. It's freezing. Even when we went to the hot springs, the water was fucking cold. So,
well, I'll say this: I think their intent with the style and cinematography came through to me with the story and the characters enough for a one, but admittedly, while not as good as say Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Now, are you falling on the side of Chris's nostalgia? Or
for his honeymoon?
My rational.
I wasn't there for his honeymoon, so
no. The nostalgia was just a little flavor on it. I love the style away from the nostalgia, but I couldn't step away. I could not include the nostalgia to it.
I think I'm gonna come down on a 0. There are parts of it that are really good, but there are parts that are very confusing and confounding to me, I guess. Sure. So in terms of that, I'm going to come down to 0.
All right, continue talking with recommendation.
All right. I would recommend this movie to certain people. Certainly not everyone. Anyone who's into like art house movies, yeah. I would say definitely one you should watch, especially for the Yorgos Lanthimos like tie-in. Like you get a little movie trivia there. That's fun.
Get to see his balls swing.
You get to see his balls swing. There are a lot of people that I would say you will not like this movie. However, like personally, I think it's probably a movie worth watching if you're really into cinema, if you're really into movies. it's a weird question when it comes down to movies like this because, yeah, I would definitely recommend it to certain people, but I know that other people would absolutely hate this, like this entire experience. So I'll probably come down on the side of a 1, but like a 1 with the asterisk. But I'll listen to what you guys have to say, and we'll see if that changes my mind.
Well, I'm going to use your often measuring stick, is that I probably would not recommend it more than I would in general. Like, of course, there's certain circumstances, certain people we know, like sure, you X person would definitely enjoy this, but to me, like, I've seen better indie-ish like flicks like this and of the same nature with the same general idea to them. And we've seen a bunch of them recently, like not recently, but for the podcast, let's say in the past year or so. So like this one will probably fade from my memory fairly quickly. And it was fine enough watching it, but it just wasn't stand out. It doesn't make me get up and say, you got to see this one. Like it's one of the best of within its, where it lies. So I'm probably looking at a soft 0 for recommendation, but that's my thought on it.
I love this movie on a very personal basis. I mean, this to me hit a lot of things, especially with regard to themes, dialogue. With that said, no, I would not recommend this movie. Because it was a personal experience to me. And like, even though Separation was a difficult watch, I think it was worthwhile, but I cannot sit here and I cannot think about who I would recommend this to. And I'm not sure how I would explain how I would recommend it to them. Like I would recommend The Separation, saying like, I would see
how to pitch this as a recommendation is what you're saying.
Yeah,
if you
honestly,
were going to,
because I sit here and I think about a lot of the films that we see, and especially the foreign films. Because I mean, the one thing I'm glad we're keeping to this is because I was telling Beth, I'm like, most of the best films I saw last year were not from this country, nor were they released last year. And I found this film, as I said, I love this film, but I did not wholly enjoy it because it did hit me.
You love this film, but you did not wholly enjoy it
because it hit a lot of. Because it hit a lot of personal things for me. So I would not know how to communicate that to anybody else.
Understandable.
It wouldn't resonate as well.
Yeah, you just communicated very well to me though.
But to your guys' point, like if you were going to talk about like cinematography, use of color, etc., I would say, yeah, check this out. To the general person, no, I would not.
I think it's intellectually an interesting film. I was happy it was over.
I agree.
Nice, yeah.
I don't think there are many I would recommend it to. Maybe people who are into gender studies. Because it is a unique look at a topic not often discussed.
Sure.
But I don't know. I can't do it though.
I think you guys have convinced me that I probably
don't flip.
There are more. Scott, you maybe put it best. There are more people I would not recommend this to than people.
That's why I leverage that against you because that's what you measured on.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna have to give it a 0 at the end of the day.
All right.
Well, would you guys like to hear the scores?
Yes, I would actually, because that just fucks up my tally.
I was sitting here like...
Actually, I was doing math this entire time. Because I assumed that you were going to recommend it and all this. Yeah. But it turns out to be the easiest of all calculations here. So, Chris, you give it the highest score with an 8. Steve-O and Scott, you give it 7s. And I... returning to my status as curmudgeon,
champion once again,
gave it a 6.
Yeah.
Did I give it a 7 or a 6? I believe I might have given it a 6 at the last moment. Did you put me on a 1 on recommend? I give it a 0.
Yes. All right. So I have 2 for style for you. Style.
2 for plot. 1 for theme.
1 for themes. 1 for protagonists. 1 for supporting. 1 for dialogue. 1 for style.
I give it a 0.
No, you give it a 0 to style.
Yeah, I was on the fence about that one too. I ended up giving it a 0.
Drives it down a bit.
No, that's all right.
Well, we're both the curmudgeons this time.
The mining town is falling apart.
6, meaning we give it a 6.75.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not a bad film. It's enjoyable enough for a certain mindset, but it really isn't it's not a need to see thing. And the other thing, like I said, other things like I've done it better. I'd recommend those kind of things more than I wouldn't. But if you're going to check it out, sure, you probably will be like, all right, it'll be like you said. intellectually engaging, and now thankfully it's over.
Like A Girl Walks Home at Night was so beautifully shot. I said I could keep the movie in as an entirety as a screensaver because it was so beautifully shot. This, and I would definitely recommend that movie. For this film, there are certain shots I would like to see again, but in a movie in total, I would not like to watch this movie again.
Gotcha.
So, thank you all for joining us. Let's keep watching our discussion of foreign films and see if a movie can overthrow separation. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer here with Christopher Morgan.
Good night.
Scott Thurlow.
I imagine you all with no penises.
And Stephen Rossi.
Goodbye.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?